Hello and welcome everyone today. I think we're in quite a few time zones, so good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you are. Thank you very much for tuning in to this information session today. My name is Nikita Bernardi, and I've been working with the legal team as well as the East Turkestan Government in Exile and the East Turkestan National Awakening Movement for the past year to raise awareness and do public outreach for a complaint that was submitted to the International Criminal Court in July of last year. Just a very brief introduction before we begin. As many of you might have seen or read, last week, and the reason for this session today, the legal team, who I will introduce in a brief second, submitted a hefty dossier of evidence to the Office of the Prosecutor last Thursday. And this evidence was submitted in order to establish jurisdiction for the International Criminal Court over crimes which are being committed by Chinese authorities against Uyghurs. So on the legal team is led by Mr. Rodney Dixon QC from Temple Garden Chambers, who have offices in London and The Hague. Mr. Dixon is in The Hague at the moment, which is the head where the International Criminal Court is based. We also have Anne Coulon as part of the team, and Paul Erdernest, and the three of them have been working tirelessly for the past few months to compile this brand new dossier of evidence which establishes jurisdiction for, which we believe establishes jurisdiction for the court to begin investigations. We also have here with us today Dr. Mamtanin Allah, who is a doctor of philosophy. He is a strategic advisor to the East Turkestan Government in Exile, and he will be helping today with translating questions and answers in English and Uyghur and any other comments that you may have for us here today. We also have Mr. Gulam Osman Yagma, who is the president of the East Turkestan Government in Exile, and we also have Mr. Saleh Hudayar, who is the Prime Minister of the East Turkestan Government in Exile and the founder of the East Turkestan National Awakening Movement. So before we begin, thank you all very much for joining us today once again. If you do have questions or comments and you are following us on social media or YouTube, you can quite simply type the comments or questions just underneath the live stream in the comment section, and the questions will come through to us. We will then answer the questions at the end of our brief description and speeches. So perhaps, Dr. Allah, would you mind just briefly translating the administrative side of that so that people know how to do Q&A, and then we can begin with Mr. Dixon. Oh, you're on mute, Dr. Allah.
Bugünkü yığınınki başqurğucusu mən Nikita Bernardi. Mən bu yerdə Angliyada joylashqan bir sot gruppasınınki sot advokatlar gruppası bilan birlikdə işləyman. Bugünkü yığınımızın asas məqsədlərindən biri xuddi biz ilgari e'lon qılınğanına oxşaş, bu qitim biz xalqaro jinoiy ishlar sotiga Uyg'urlarga munosabatli jumladan Uyg'urlarningki başqa dövlətlərdən Xitayga məcburi qaytarılıb ketişiga aloqadar yeni dəlillərini tepib, bu dəlillərini xalqaro jinoiy ishlar sotiga sunduq. Şu münasibətlə biz bugün bu haqdagi sizlarga bu haqda texnimi kengri və texnimi təfsili məlumatlarını berishga tirishimiz. Xəbərinizdə bo'lganidek, xalqaro jinoiy ishlar sotininki bu qitim yeni tayinlangan qaralğuchi amaldori bizningki intayin təfsili yazılğan Uyg'urlarninki shu chet ellardan Xitoyga majburiy qaytarilib ketish ahvoliga aloqador materiallarimizni topshirib oldi. Bizning bu materiallarni tayyorlash orqali yetmoqchi bo'lgan nishonimiz Xitoyninki Uyg'urlarninki haq huquqlarini dafsan qilayotganlik va eng oxirida Xitoylarninki Uyg'ur xalqiga qarata elib berayotgan qat'iyamiga qarata jinoiy paketlarni to'plash va bu jinoiy paketlarni xalqaro soti orqali bir taraf qilish maqsadiga yetishni ko'zlaymiz. Shu munosabatdan bugun biz bizningki ataqliq Angliyada turishliq ham ishxonasi ham Angliyada va ham Den Haag'da yoki The Hague deymiz. Ikkilisida ishxonasi bor. Rodney Dixon apandim bor. Bu o'zi xalqaro jinoiy ishlar soti bo'yicha advokatlikdagi advokati bizningki butun ishlarimizga yetakchilik qilayotgan kishi bu bo'ladi. Uning bilan bir vaqtda bugun bizning guruhning a'zolari, shuningdek Sharq Turkiston surgun hukumatiningki raisi G'ulom Osmon Yag'mi apandi va Sharq Turkiston surgun hukumatiningki bosh ministri Salih Xudoyor va men Sharq Turkiston surgun hukumatiningki strategik maslahatchisi men aloqatorliklar bugungi bu yig'inimizga qatnashyapmiz. Endi mening asosiy vazifam bugungi tushgan savollarni agar Uyg'ur tushgan bo'lsa tarjima qilish, shuning bilan bir vaqtda hozirga o'xshash so'zlangan ba'zi muhim qismlarni inglizchadan Uyg'urchaga tarjima qilish yoki Uyg'urcha berilgan bo'lsa Uyg'urchadan inglizchaga tarjima qilish vazifasini o'tayman. Bugungi vazifam asosliq. Şuna bugün sizlarninki mush qitimliq yig'inga oid savolinglar bo'lsa, mushu bizningki savollarni yozdigan bir nimamiz bor. Mushu qarasang chiqadi, ko'rayotgan mushu ekraninglarda. Shu yerga savolinglarni qo'yib qo'ysang, mayli qaysi xil tilda bo'lsin, hatto Xitoy tilida so'rasanglar bo'ladi. Inglizcha, Uyg'urcha yoki Xitoycha 3 xil tilda so'rasanglar bo'ladi. Mush savollarning hammasini men eng oxirida bizning mutaxassisimiz javob berdi va bu javobni men sizlarga Uyg'urcha tarjima qilib diqqatingizga sunaman. Shuning bilan hozircha tugdi. Qani diqqatinglar bizningki bugungi programmamizda bo'lsin. Nikita, translation is finished.
Thank you very much, Dr. Alla. So without further ado, I'll pass over to Mr. Rodney Dixon QC, who's going to give a description of the work that we've been doing for the past few months and what we expect to be doing beyond this week as well. So thank you very much, Rodney Dixon, over to you. Oh, Rodney, you're on mute. Okay.
Right, start again. Thank you very much for the kind introductions and welcome to everybody attending our discussion today. I understand there will be translations of what I say. Will that be done as I go along or at the end?
We'll do that at the end.
All right. I'm going to provide an update for everyone today where we stand in the ICC case here in The Hague. The team, that's myself and Anne and Paul and Nikita, have been working over the last number of months to advance the case here. And it's very important that you are all informed about where we are and that you continue to support our case as much as possible, talk about it, spread the word. It is so important that people know about it in order for it to be advanced at the ICC. The more it is in the public domain, the more chance we have of succeeding. So I would encourage you to go out and to engage with others and also continue to support us, because we need that in order to arrive at our destination, which is to get the ICC to take the case, open an investigation, and look to bring charges against those responsible. So it's a case where there can be actual prosecutions of persons in the future, and we mustn't lose sight of that. It does take time. I know that is frustrating for many of you following this. It's also frustrating for us as the lawyers as well. But that's the way the justice process at the international level works. It's a slow, methodical process. But if we stick at it, I'm confident that we can succeed, but we have to be very determined. We mustn't lose faith, and we must continue to support each other to get there. Now's not the time to be doubting or raising questions. It's the time for unity, for all Uyghurs and all of those who support the Uyghur community to unite together to ensure that we get this over the finish line. It will not be done next month. I can't tell you that here today. It's not going to be done this year, but it can be done in the months and years ahead, providing we are rigidly determined and that we don't at any point fall back, slacken, and doubt ourselves. Where are we today then? You will recall that in December of last year, the ICC prosecutor told us when we had filed our complaint to her to open an investigation, she told us at that stage, no, I'm not ready to move. I do not have enough evidence that the court has jurisdiction. Jurisdiction is the basis for the court to operate. If they don't have the jurisdiction, we can't go ahead. That's what she told us in a nutshell. But she also said to us that if you get further evidence, then bring it to me and we will look at this and I will make a decision then about opening an investigation. We explained to her that we had not been able to get all of the evidence because of COVID restrictions and other problems, that we were still investigating and that would continue and that we would be back very soon with the further evidence. We are now at that point. We, from January up until May, conducted our investigations. We were able to get persons on the ground in various countries conducting interviews, recording interviews, taking photographs of what they were able to see as well. Now, we can't go, unfortunately, into the detail of this because it's very sensitive material. There are obvious security considerations. So we have to be very careful. But all of that material has been gathered and it is now available and submitted to the prosecutor. So the prosecutor's office has it. They will keep it secure. But we can't go into as much detail as we would want to at this stage. Obviously, in the future, that'll be different, we hope. It will emerge. But for now, what I can very clearly confirm with you is that from January to May, we conducted these investigations and we were able to get a substantial body of evidence, which we've submitted to the prosecutor last week, addressing exactly the issues that she said we needed to. She said that there were a number of questions that were not properly addressed because there wasn't sufficient evidence. We've now given the prosecutor that evidence. And we are urging the prosecutor now to look at it and then take the step, which they were not able to do in December, but we say they are definitely able to do now with that evidence, to open an investigation. The prosecutor in this case would have to act under his or her own powers to go to the judges to request that an investigation is opened. That's exactly what the prosecutor did in the Rohingya case involving both Myanmar and Bangladesh. She went to the judges asking for an investigation to be opened. And we say exactly the same can be done and must be done in the Uyghur case. We are using, as I've explained to you before, the Rohingya case as a precedent, which means what has been done in that case applies equally in our case. In that case, they said that even though the main country concerned, Myanmar, and in our case it's China, is not signed up to the ICC, that doesn't mean that the court doesn't have jurisdiction. If an element of the crime that you are alleging takes place in an ICC state party territory. In that case, it was Bangladesh, persons being forced into Bangladesh. In our case, it's Tajikistan and Cambodia, which are both ICC state parties, where we say that acts have occurred that are elements of crimes over which the court has jurisdiction. and because they occur on the territory of the ICC state party, the prosecutor can therefore investigate. As long as one element occurs there, then the court has jurisdiction over that aspect, but also the continuation of that crime into China as well. So that's the precedent we're using. It applies in our case, and we were saying she should follow the same steps that she did in the Rohingya case, a very important case. But the Uyghur case is one that should also be investigated in the same way. She should apply that precedent now and open an investigation as she's done there by going to the judges, should have to make the application to the judges, presenting the evidence and asking that she can then have a full investigation, so that the purpose of that is to then decide whether you can bring charges against the actual people who have perpetrated these deeds. So what is the evidence that we are talking about that has taken place on an ICC state party? This is the new evidence that we've gathered, which we have given to the prosecutor. I can't go into detail, as I've emphasized, but I will give you an outline to show you how important this evidence is. It is absolutely critical evidence. This is a groundbreaking moment. It's the first time that this kind of evidence has been acquired and given to the ICC prosecutor. So this is not to be underestimated in any way whatsoever. And you've seen probably the extensive media coverage from last week on it, with many journalists picking up on it and highlighting how historic this moment is. What we've been able to find from our investigations is that Chinese authorities, Chinese operatives, have in fact gone onto the territory of an ICC state party, that's Tajikistan in this case. We will also be looking at Cambodia in due course, but we focused on Tajikistan at this case. We have found that there is evidence that Chinese operatives have gone on to the territory of an ICC state party, and they have identified, targeted, and rounded up Uyghur persons living there in order to deport them back to China. And in the cases that we've looked at, those persons who have been in that way detained and taken back by Chinese officials, they have never been heard from or seen again. Our investigations show, and I can't go into how these figures have all been calculated, but they show it, and it's based on proper evidence, that at a minimum 85% to 90% of the Uyghur population in Tajikistan has been targeted and moved out into China over the past number of years. 2016, 17, and 18, and going into 19 were the main times when that happened. It was done in small amounts so as not to attract attention. Persons were moved in small groups so that it wouldn't be noticed overnight, like 1,000 people disappearing overnight. So it shows a very sophisticated and cunning campaign to do this just below the radar, over time and patiently, in order to achieve the goal of ensuring that there are no Uyghurs essentially left in Tajikistan, and that they're all in China, where they can be targeted, controlled, and persecuted. Our evidence shows that there are around about 100 Uyghurs left in Tajikistan, and they are heavily controlled by Chinese operatives. They're under surveillance. They are very afraid. It's a toxic environment. There's also evidence that this is happening in other countries as well. Some of them signed up to the ICC, others not. In those places where obviously China can't just go in, in many European countries, in Australia, persons are being threatened there by using family members who are back in China to call them, or to get Chinese officials to call them, to tell them they have to come back, otherwise persons there would be harmed. That same approach was used to some extent in Tajikistan, but as I said, there's also evidence that force was directly used to gather up persons and bring them back. There's also evidence that persons have just disappeared randomly, never to be heard from again. The way that it has unfolded is noteworthy. It shows a degree of overall planning and implementation, which shows that it wasn't just done at a whim. It was planned at the highest level and implemented in a systematic way, with Uyghurs who are there, living there, have lived there for many, many years and working there, having their paperwork questioned by the Chinese consulate in Tajikistan. And when they're not able to address those issues, then the authorities detain them and they are deported back by Chinese operatives into China. The paperwork questions that we've been able to find out about are really a ruse. They're made up. It's not as though they've got real immigration problems. It's a way of trying to put a legal veneer on a fundamentally unlawful act and a crime against humanity. So that can't be used as a defense by China that, oh, well, these people have all broken immigration laws. That's just not true. We know that they will probably try and say that. That's why they've done it with this so-called legal justification. But there is none, and they can't be the ones to determine whether or not there has been a breach of any national laws in order to decide whether persons can be brought back. Because their real intention, from the evidence that we've gathered, is to ensure that people are brought back regardless, and they're not allowed to live normal lives there, and they're brought back so that they can be targeted inside China. And we know what's happening inside China with mass detentions, torture, sterilization, rape, persons disappearing. We have also submitted a body of evidence that has come out recently, or that we haven't been aware of previously, to the ICC to show what is happening inside China, to connect it to the events outside, and in order to show the overall degree to which this is planned and implemented at the highest levels. It shows both the conduct, but also the intent of those who are implementing this at the very highest levels. So the new evidence that we have gathered is a breakthrough. I mean, it shows that if you're coming onto the territory of an ICC state party, then you lose your so-called immunity because you haven't signed up. When you come onto the territory of another state who is a party to the ICC, you are subject to that state's laws, as occurs all the time whenever we travel around the world. You can't say, well, I'm immune from your laws because I'm not a national of your country, or my country hasn't signed up to the same things that you've signed up. You are responsible for ensuring that you obey the laws of that country. And by not doing that, China has exposed themselves. The officials of China have exposed themselves to the ICC's jurisdiction. And they can't say that because they haven't signed up, they are now able to escape. That's not the way the law works. They know that. And they would certainly not allow you to go to China and say, oh, well, my country's not signed up, so therefore I can do whatever I want here. They would apply Chinese laws to anyone, irrespective of their nationality, as they are entitled to do within the borders of their own country. That's what's happening here with Tajikistan. The state party has signed up, and when other countries come in and commit unlawful acts, then those acts can be referred to the ICC for investigation. Those acts in and of themselves, the targeting of people, the abductions, the detentions and deportations, are crimes that come within the ICC's jurisdiction as crimes against humanity. But we also want to emphasize, and this is where it comes back to the Rohingya precedent I mentioned earlier, that what we see happening here is not just those acts isolated on their own. Those acts in Tajikistan, the ones I've described, are the very first acts within the overall plan of China to commit crimes against humanity and genocide against the Uyghur persons. Now, yes, we know what's happening inside. There's been wide reporting on that. But when you go outside of China and round up persons in order to bring them back, we say that is the first act in the alleged genocide plan and the alleged plan to commit both genocide and crimes against humanity. Going out to arrest persons in that way and bringing them back is the first stage to then taking them inside the country to persecute and eradicate them. You can't do it unless you have the arrest first of all. There's some of those arrests, as we know, taking place inside China on a widespread scale, but there are also some taking place outside of China to bring persons back into East Turkestan. So not only are the acts that the Chinese authorities committing on Tajikistan territory a basis for jurisdiction, but they are also, because of their continuation into China, where other acts then occur. And based on the Rohingya precedent, our submission is that the court has jurisdiction over the whole crime. So not only what happens in Tajikistan, but as it continues cross-border as a continuing crime into China as well. And that's why we're asking the prosecutor to look at the allegation of genocide, but then also crimes against humanity for the deportations and the persecution and the range of other acts that are occurring. Because she has jurisdiction not only over the acts that start in Tajikistan, but also then what continues thereafter, because they're part of the same ongoing unlawful conduct. We've set that all out based on the evidence. We've supplied the evidence. I can't go into the details of how that has been set out and exactly what it contains, but what it shows are these aspects that I've highlighted now. There's also a category of evidence quite significantly which shows how the border areas are increasingly controlled by China, the Tajik-Chinese border, with increased fortifications and steps being taken to prevent Uyghurs now from getting out of China. Our allegation is that Uyghurs have been able to flee, and that is a crime in and of itself, fleeing from China into an ICC state party, but that recently there have been increased attempts to ensure that that border is virtually uncrossable, with Chinese installations set up, some within Tajikistan, with border areas heavily patrolled, and that shows the intention as well of the Chinese authorities to make sure they can use that border to get people out when they need, but also to stop them crossing there. And if they do cross, to be able to arrest them and bring them back. So there's a further body of evidence that we've submitted from our investigations along those lines. Our investigation is continuing. This is not the end of it. Our investigators have been on the ground for some time and still are. We will keep getting further evidence. We say what there is now is sufficient for the prosecutor to take the step of opening an investigation, but also that there will be further evidence down the line. So we are therefore encouraging the prosecutor who's leaving and the new prosecutor who's in fact coming in this week to have a full examination of all of our evidence and further evidence that we're going to present, and to look to swiftly move to make an application to open an investigation. This is a shocking discovery that we've made, and it simply can't now be overlooked. There are, yes, jurisdictional issues, but we have firmly addressed them, and it would be a dismay, not only to those who've come forward and given the evidence, but also others who are going to, if this wasn't looked at further. We believe that there's more evidence to come, and a signal should be sent that that evidence can be provided, and that this is not going to be blocked. This is going to be something where all of the evidence can come out, and it can be thoroughly looked at by an independent international court. I want to conclude by saying that this is the only body at the international level that can actually investigate and prosecute Chinese officials for what has happened. It might take some time, but it's the only body that can do it, and it will be based on this evidence and the further evidence that is gathered. It's the only hope for having prosecutions at the international level. And we need to keep that alive, because that will send the message that you can't simply get away with this on the basis that no one is going to prosecute you. This will send out a very clear signal that you're being watched, and that if there are further acts committed, they will be prosecuted. It's one of the few ways in which we can, at this stage, seek to deter the crimes and ensure that they are not repeated on the grand scale that is going on at the moment. So it is vital that the ICC take that stance and that we all support it to do so. We have had widespread support from politicians, from parliaments, from MPs, and we hope that that will continue because we need to show to the ICC that this is not an isolated campaign. It's one that has an international resonance. The ICC was set up to deal with exactly these kinds of mass human rights violations. This is a case like none other for the ICC to address. And we hope now that with the evidence that we've provided, that very important step will be taken very soon. We are, in the coming months, just so you know where we're going to round off, going to be continuing with the investigation, but we're also going to be looking to engage with the prosecutor, because the prosecutor did say to us that they would meet with us once this evidence was made available. So we're looking to do that and looking through that process of engagement to get the next step taken of having examined all the available evidence, making the application for the investigation to be opened. We really can't emphasize enough how far we've come in a short space of time. We are hoping that the process can now be speeded up as much as possible. But we need you to remain with us each step of the way. And that's honestly going to make all the difference. Not for us to be questioning, for us to be divided. We need to be as united as we can now to achieve our ultimate goal of justice and accountability for those who have suffered and those who continue to suffer. Thank you very much. I will leave it at that for now, but I'm sure there'll be questions, and I can address any other matters when those arise. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Rodney. I'm now going to pass the floor to the president of the East Turkestan government in exile. I believe he's going to say a few words, and also then to Saleh Hudaya, the Prime Minister. And Dr. Allah, perhaps you will need to translate what the president says into English, if possible.
Okay. G'ulamka, siz azroq gap qilamsiz? Sizning gapingizni men tarjima qilib beraman. Uyg'urcha qilsangiz inglizchaga.
Oh, he's on mute.
Naq meydanını teşkillagan Rodney'deki son başçılığındaki advokatlar gruppasi. Şundaqla bu naq meydanını ekrandan görüvatkan barlık Şarkı Türkistanlık eziz halkım, hammalarga salam. Advokatlar gruppasının Şarkı Türkistan halkı üçün bu işni qilayotganligi ta'rifga sig'maydigan bir ulug'liqqa ega. 21-asrda inson qalbidan chiqqan, qatlamga uchrayotgan Sharq Turkistonlik xalq uchun, butun dunyo tarafidan tashlab etilgan, yetim qolgan Sharq Turkiston xalqi uchun Holocaustga uchrayotgan Sharq Turkiston xalqi uchun, egisiz Sharq Turkiston xalqi uchun bu ishni qilayotganligingga ishonamanki, ulug'liqda chuqur tarixga yozilgusi, haqqinglarda tarix yozilgusi va sizlar uchun obida tiklangusi. Bu nuqtada men Sharq Turkiston xalqiga vakolatan hammanglarga rahmat aytaman. Şundaqla bu davada muvaffaqiyat qazanış üçün Şərq Türkistan xalqı umumyüzlük biz tarafta turuşu ve bizni qollaşı nayeti zörür. Şuna xalqımga bizni qollashqa maddi bo'lmagandimi, ma'naviy jihatdan bizni qollashqa, bizga hamdam bo'lishqa chaqiraman ve bizni yalğız qo'ymasligini umid qilaman.
This is the translation of the president of the East Turkestan government in exile. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude to the lawyers team led by Mr. Rodney, and for them giving this presentation today. And secondly, I would like to express my gratitude to the people of East Turkestan who are watching this program today. And so the whole aim of today's program is to look at one of the most horrific crimes against humanity, and also genocide in the 21st century that Uyghurs are going through. This is the horrific crime against a people who are abandoned by the world and who are going through the same kind of Holocaust that Jewish people went through. And this is the work that this team has done is a great, splendid, beyond any description. Because when the Uyghurs are so helpless and hopeless, they come to our aid to open investigation into this genocide. And this, your dedication, your work will be written in history, not only in our history, but history as such, because of its magnanimity, in particular, its importance for the lives of Uyghurs. And at the same time, and I would like to call upon my people, the people of East Turkestan, to support us, not necessarily from a material basis, but also, most importantly, from the moral basis, a spiritual basis, because we need you. Don't leave us alone, because this struggle is very complicated, very difficult, and everlasting. That's why we would like you to be with us on this very long and very difficult journey. But at the end of the day, we would like to see justice is done, and with the work of this team. And finally, I would like you to support us. I am calling upon my people of East Turkestan, never lose your hope and be with us. We will finish this very important task in our history. Thank you for your watching.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Allah, and thank you, Mr. President. Now I'll hand over to the Prime Minister for a few quick comments before we move on to the Q&A portion of the event. So over to you, Prime Minister.
Thank you. I will try to keep this very brief. As Mr. Rodney Dixon, QC, stated earlier, the ICC is the only body in the international community under established international laws to be able to investigate and prosecute Chinese officials for genocide and other crimes against humanity. And it is precisely this reason that we initiated this formal complaint back in July of last year. Given the new evidence that we have submitted recently, there is jurisdiction, we're hoping, placed on what we found through our investigations, we know that there is jurisdiction to establish an investigation as soon as possible to ultimately help us seek justice. What the Uyghurs are going through right now, as reiterated by many of the speakers before me, is the most atrocious crimes against humanity and genocide that we have witnessed post-Holocaust, especially in the 21st century. That's why we call on all governments around the world, especially governments that adhere to democracy, that adhere to human rights, that adhere to freedom, and especially those that are member states of the International Criminal Court, to support our case, to support us in obtaining justice through the international laws. In order for us, victimized peoples, oppressed peoples like us, the International Criminal Court is unfortunately the only avenue for us to seek justice for the crimes that are happening today. Thus, it's important that the ICC, the Office of the Prosecutor, and the judges open this investigation, because it also puts the credibility of the ICC at line as well. Because if the ICC fails to investigate the most atrocious humanitarian crisis that is happening in the 21st century, then it loses credibility to investigate other matters, other crimes that are happening in other parts of the world. So in this regard, we are hopeful that the ICC will open the investigation as soon as possible, and we are calling on, again, all governments, organizations, and individuals who care about the Uyghurs, who care about human rights, who care about justice, who care about ending atrocities, to help us by supporting our case at the ICC, both materially and morally and spiritually. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Prime Minister. We've had a question that's come through in English, so I'll just quickly read that out. It's from Harry Chen, he says, "This is Han with Radio Free Asia. Do you have any insights on why China would go to such a great length to deport Uyghurs in Tajikistan? They are a very small community. I would imagine that some might argue that pressuring them not to speak up about Xinjiang abroad might be easier than bringing them back home."
Doktor, ben tümden siz mani Uygurca tercüme kıysınız. Ulan kemme bir günür resimiz ulan kemme bir Çinse, onun için belki Çin cevaplaymış olsa şunun farkı.
Nikita, could you please repeat the question once more? Sorry.
Yes, absolutely. The question is from Radio Free Asia. It says, do you have any insights on why China would go to such a great length to deport Uyghurs in Tajikistan?
Uygurca tercüme kılay. Let me translate it back into Uyghur. Yani Erkin Asya Radyosu'ndaki bir muhbiri bunda soraptı. Çin degan bir muhbir soraptı. Yani nima uchun Xitoy bu kadar zo'riqib Tojikiston iborat buni kichik bir davlatdagi Uyg'urlarni tutib ekirib ketishga bu kadar zo'riqidi yoki buning uchun harakat qiladi, buning sababi nimadir?
I will start by answering and then others can add. This is precisely the kind of issue that we're asking the ICC prosecutor to investigate. Why are these actions going on? What is the real intention behind them? It's through the investigation of these crimes that can be uncovered. Our findings so far from the evidence that we have discovered, given the way in which this rounding up process is taking place, the fact that force is being used, that abuse is being used, shows that the intention is to silence Uyghurs and crush them, to make sure that they have no voice outside of China and that they're brought back in to China, into East Turkestan, and then controlled and targeted and exterminated there. That's what the pattern of the evidence shows so far, and that's what needs to be further investigated. It's the genocidal intent and the intent to commit widespread crimes against humanity that is shown in this kind of behavior. Why, you're right to ask the question, why would you go to those kind of lengths? Why would you fortify the border areas in those ways? It's in order, from the evidence that we have gathered, to ensure that the Uyghur voice is crushed and destroyed. And it's not only happening in Tajikistan, it's happening in many other countries as well. I mean, why are persons being brought back from Cambodia, from Egypt, from Saudi Arabia, from Turkey, from so many different countries? Why is there surveillance and intimidation going on in places like Australia? This is all evidence that we've submitted to show that it is linked, that there's a concerted campaign here to make sure that there's maximum control, that no one can speak out, and that persons can then be persecuted in a ruthless fashion away from the international spotlight inside China. I mean, this is not unusual for genocides and mass crimes against humanity around the world. Even sitting right here in Holland today, Jewish persons in the Second World War were rounded up en masse in this very country and taken into Germany and then targeted and exterminated. That kind of tactic has been used in many other genocides and crimes against humanity. And we're seeing exactly the same practice here, either because the authorities there have learned from previous actions or they know how they need to do it to ensure an effective outcome. But that's precisely why this is such an important case for the prosecutor to look at and to signal that it is being looked at, that this kind of behavior, which say has a pattern from the past, cannot continue, and it is going to be stamped out through an investigation and through charging persons for undertaking these kinds of appalling acts.
Thank you for that, Rodney. I don't know if anyone else had anything else to add to that answer. Otherwise, perhaps Dr. Allah, you can give a summary of that answer in Uyghur, if possible. Oh, you're muted again.
Javobninki qisqacha mazmuni shu. Ya'ni bu savolda nima uchun Xitoyninki bu qadar zo'riqib, bu qadar intayin buningda yanma kichik bir davlatga Uyg'urlarni akirib ketishining asosiy sabablarining birisi bu Uyg'urlarning ovozini bo'g'ish. Ham bu orqali ularni Xitoyga qaytarib ekitib, andikin ularni kontrol qilish va eng oxirisida ularni yo'qotishdan iborat shunday bir maqsad. Bu maqsad dal bu qatliamning maqsadi. İnsaniyatga qarshi elib berilgan jinoyatning maqsadi bo'ldi. Shu sababdan biz buni ko'ramiz. Bundaq bu xil taktika ilgari Ikkinchi dunyo urushidagi Yahudi qatliamidan bo'lgan. Yahudilik nimaninki mo natsistlarniki mo Yahudilar qarta elib borgan butkul yo'qotishninki qatliam maqsadi va uning usullari mana shu o'xshash shaklda bo'lgan. Hattoki men bugun turib mush davlatda, ya'ni Gollandiyadami nurg'unlagan Yahudilar o'xshash usulda tutilib, bir yerga yig'ilib, anandan keyin jazo lagerlariga avatilib, shu yerda yo'qotilgan. Endi bu ularningki eng oxirgi nimasi Uyg'urlarningki hech qanday ovozini chiqarmaslik, ularningki bu ishlarni oshkorlash qatorliqni oldini olish qatorliq jihatlarda Xitoyninki bu qadar zo'riqishninki sababi mana shu. Bu jihat ilib o'tgan vaqtda bu ilgirki qatliamni epag'ichlar jumladan natsistlar bilan Xitoylarning o'rtasidagi biz bundaq bir taktik jihatdagi, ya'ni qatliam epirishlik taktik jihatdagi o'rtaqlikni bayqay olamiz. Shuning uchun bu savolning javobi shuki, Xitoylarning bu qadar Xitoy hukumatining bu qadar jafo chekib ketishining sababi asosan Uyg'urlarning ovozini bo'g'ish, ham ularni qo'rqitish, eng oxirisi ularni yo'qotish. O'zi qaytarib ekilib davlat Xitoyning ichiga kirib olgandan keyin yo'qotishni ko'zlaydi.
Thank you for that. There are no other English questions that have come through. Dr. Alla, I don't know if you can see the comments bar on the left of this, on the right of the screen, if there's anything in Uyghur that we've missed.
Just a second, let me just...
I believe.
No questions in Uyghur so far.
Okay.
No questions.
Okay. Something's just come through, I'm not sure.
But people have expressed the best wishes for the success of this case. So that's the translation, but no questions have ever forwarded.
Oh, that's very kind. Thank you very much to them. Perhaps, Dr. Alla, do you think there's anything that we might have missed out that you would like us to describe a bit further? Similarly, Prime Minister and Mr. President, if there's anything else that you believe that needs a bit further description from the legal team, please let us know before we wrap up.
There's one last thing, it's not question, but it's just comment, but it would be a bit interesting. Let me turn it into a question form that perhaps some Uyghurs are a little bit confused about the nature of the Uyghur tribunal in London, which has finished quite recently, and also the case to be submitted to the International Criminal Court. So can anybody give the audience the differences between two processes, but also some kind of interrelatedness in these two processes as well?
That's a very important question, and it must be clarified so that everyone knows that the tribunal that's doing its work in London is doing a fantastic job in getting evidence of the alleged genocide and crimes against humanity together, persons coming to testify before it. We are in contact with that tribunal and would like to share whatever evidence we can. The problem is that we can't necessarily do that now because it's all confidential and going to the ICC. But if there's anything that can be shared, we would want to do that, and vice versa, if they have anything that can assist us. So we're working together. It's essential to know that this isn't some kind of competition. It's working together for the same end. The tribunal there is gathering particularly evidence of what's happening inside of China. We are looking for ICC purposes at getting evidence which happened abroad in ICC state parties and continued into China, because that's how we can get jurisdiction. But it covers the same underlying criminal conduct. So we're working closely. We want to continue that, and we want to ensure that there can be an exchange of evidence wherever that is possible. Of course, it's slightly more difficult for us because we are working with the ICC and the prosecutor, and we can't provide material that's confidential to that process and essential for that process going forward. But we'll try and see what can be done, because it would also be very helpful if that tribunal, in looking at what is going on, was able to comment on evidence of what was happening outside of China, and to support the need, depending on their findings, for an ICC investigation to be opened, because the tribunal will know that their powers are limited. They can't actually investigate, prosecute through charging persons at that tribunal. That they can make findings based on their evidence, but they can't take the next step of investigating and prosecuting persons. That's why the ICC process is so important, because it allows for an actual court case to be launched in the future if you've got sufficient evidence, and we can get persons detained if they travel outside of China. And if they don't, well, then there will be international arrest warrants which prevent them traveling, which in and of itself can be seen as a success. So the tribunal will know that it can only go so far, but we would hope that they will assist in providing us with information and encourage others to support the ICC process because of where it can lead in the future. So as I said, throughout my talk that we need to be united on this. We all need to work together to ensure that, yes, the tribunal can do its work and bring out its findings, but then we can also get this investigation opened at the ICC, where we could then potentially have actual prosecutions in the future.
Thank you for that answer. Dr. Allah, if you'd like to translate, and then a few more questions have come through in English, which I'll ask after that.
Bu qısqacha tarjima qilay. Men bu ikki jarayon, ya'ni Uyg'ur soti bilan shu Uyg'urlarningki ishini chetda xalqarodagi birdan-bir shunday ishni surishtiradigan xalqaro jinoiy ishlar sotiga sunish ikkisiniki mohiyat jihatdagi ba'zi bir farqlari bor. Ya'ni birisi bu Uyg'ur soti shu Sharq Turkistonda bo'layotgan Uyg'urlar qaratilayotgan butkul shu Xitoy hukumati olib berayotgan jinoiy qilmishlarni faktlar asosida tekshirishni asos qiladi. Ammo bu xalqaro jinoiy soti faqat shu Xitoyning sirtidagi shu xalqaro jinoiy ishlar sotiga a'zo bo'lgan davlatda Xitoyningki Uyg'urlarga qarshi olib berayotgan faoliyatlarini va buningki Xitoyning ichida davomlashayotgan va davomlashayotgan holatlarning hammasini va uningki Uyg'urlar qanchalik ziyon ko'radi, buni tekshirishni asos qiladi. Bu jihatda ilib aytgan vaqtda ikkisiniki nimasi o'xshamaydi. Ammo garchi ikkilisi ikki xil nuqtadan o'xshash qarsimi, lekin ularning qarayotgan masalasi eng oxirida o'xshash. Ya'ni bu Uyg'urlarningki hozirgi beshiga kelayotgan mana shu qat'iyamningki o'xshash bo'lmagan nuqtadan kuzatilishi va o'xshash nuqtadan bo'lmagan nuqtadan bir taraf qilinishini asos qiladi. Hamda bu Uyg'ur soti bu shu Uyg'urlarga elib berayotgan shu qat'iy kishilik huquq dafsanchilikni qarta bir nimani faktlarni to'plab bularni qilgan bo'lsa-mu, ammo ularningki mushu qat'iyamni va insoniyatga qarshi elib berilgan jinoyatni o'tkazishga qarta qonuniy jihatdan nimalar bo'lmaydi. Qonuniy jihatdan elib beriladigan bosqichlar bo'lmaydi. Ammo xalqaro jinoiy ishlar qonuni soti agar mushu faktlarga asosan bu oshkora tekshirishni boshlasa va eng oxirida buningga qonuniy jihatdan hukm chiqarsa, bu vaqtda Uyg'urlarga qarshi elib berilayotgan mush jinoyatni bag'ich shaxslarga qarata qonuniy jazo yurgizdi. Masalan, u shaxslar Xitoyning sirtida sayohatga yoki Xitoyning sirtiga chiqib qolsa, shu shaxslar qaysi yo'lga chiqqan bo'lsa, shu yerda tutiladi, ya'ni shu yerda qonuniy javobgarlik uchraydi. Ammo gerçi bular o'ttirsa farqlar bo'lsa-mu, ammo eng oxirisida har ikki jarayondagi Uyg'urlar masalasi, bu Uyg'urlarning hozirgi beshini o'tkazayotgan qat'iyamningki xalqarodagi toninishi va ularningki bir qonun jihatdan bir taraf qilinishi da intayin muhim roli var. Şuna bu ikkisi bu Uyg'urlarningki shu qat'iyamningki bir taraf qilinishda intayin muhim bo'lgan bosqichlar qatoriga kirdi.
Thank you very much for that. Two more questions that have come through in English. The first one is asking if China would be able to have any effect, and I believe the person asking the question means pressure on the ICC to not open an investigation into the crimes. So would China be able to affect the ICC investigation? And the second question is, if we were to win the case, what would that look like? What would be the result? And so what would be the next steps after opening an investigation?
For the first question, the OTP under the outgoing prosecutor and the new prosecutor is a completely independent body. It does not answer to any state party or any states who are not signed up, or to the Security Council. That's the whole point of having this independent power to investigate and apply to open an investigation, is that the prosecutor can do it proprio moto, on his or her own accord and action. So China cannot stop the prosecutor from conducting this investigation. Yes, they might try and raise the stakes. They will complain. They will raise the counter arguments, but that's not going to stand in the way of an independent prosecutor looking at the investigation based solely on the evidence and nothing else. The way it would work in practice, and this is to move on to the next question, is that if the prosecutor decided to open an investigation, they would be able to conduct that investigation themselves independently, be able to go to Tajikistan like we have done, which is an ICC state party, and other states as well, that they could request to go to China. China wouldn't be bound to let them in, but we would encourage China, if there's nothing to hide, to cooperate with this investigation to show that they have a defense. Everyone is entitled, of course, to put their version of events as well, and they could do that in an investigation. But the prosecutor would be able to go to all other countries outside of China to gather that evidence and to build a case, and if there was sufficient evidence, then to bring the charges. So the answer is a very short no, that China cannot stop this happening. But in order for it to happen, we need to make sure we can continue, that we can get the evidence and build up the case as much as possible. So that's where we need to keep going, and we need your support for that end.
And the second question, Rodney, was about what happens next if an investigation were to be opened.
Well, I was saying that if it was, that the prosecutor would then himself look to gather the evidence. So we can, as we've been doing, provide evidence, but ultimately it would be the prosecutor who'd have to go and verify that evidence and collect the evidence themselves. We could remain involved in providing witnesses, in providing evidence, but it would need to be undertaken by the prosecutor then. And then a decision is made whether there's enough evidence to bring charges. And then you apply for an arrest warrant or arrest warrants on that basis. So that's what is the procedure. That's what lies further down the road. We've got to get over the first stage now of getting the investigation open first. That's the critical point. Once that happens, then all of these steps will be allowed to unfold, of actually gathering all the evidence and looking to bring the charges and have trials when persons are arrested.
Thank you for that. Dr. Ala, over to you.
Maşu Xitaylarninki bu qitimliqi xalqaro jinoiy ishlar sotininki o'ziga sunilgan mushu arzni qarta to'xtatadigan qudrati bormi yoki mumkinchiligi bormi degan savolga Rodney apandimning javobi shuki, uni hargiz to'sanmaydi. Hattoki u Xitoy hukumati garchi bu xalqaro jinoiy ishlar sotiga topshirilgan bu nimalarga qarta paketlar qarta qarshi paketlarni qo'yishi ham o'zini oqlashi, bunun qarshi o'zini oqlashi mumkin, bu ishlarni qila oladi, ammo bu jarayonning hech nimasini to'sanmaydi. Bu jarayonda oldi bilan bu paketlar qaralg'uchi prosecutorga qaralg'uchi suniladi. Qaralg'uchi bularning hammasini ko'rib chiqib, hatto o'zi mayli u er yoki ayol bo'lsin, u o'zi shu xalqaro jinoiy ishlar sotiga tava bo'lgan davlatga, masalan bizning hozirgi ishimizda bu davlat Tojikistonga berib, o'zi bir qo'lliq yana boshqa paketlarni to'playdi va bu paketlarni to'plash orqali eng oxiri bu Uyg'urlarninki bu masalasi qarta tekshirishni boshlaydi. Bu ishdagi eng ochiqlik masala tekshirishninki boshlanishi, tekshirish boshlanib bo'lgandan keyin anandan keyin bu yerda oxirisida tekshirish boshlandi. Buningga sotchilarning hukmi bo'ladi. Sotchilarning hukmi chiqib bo'lgandan keyin buningga qarta jazo e'lon qilindi. Jazo e'lon qilingandan keyin jazo ijro qilindi. Mana bu jarayonlarning hammasida hech qasda Xitoy bu jarayonlarni to'sab bo'lolmaydi.
And could I add as well that we have, as you probably know, a crowd fund available where we are looking to keep gathering funds to, in particular, support the investigation on the ground, which can be financially quite onerous. I'm sure you can understand that. So I think Nikita can mention at the end, or we can work out a way of making sure that the crowd fund is circulated, because that's really the fuel that we need to keep this going. And anything that you can contribute would immeasurably help us in keeping this alive and taking it forward and making sure that we succeed.
Let me translate this. This is also quite important. Bu ishlarninki ro'yobga chiqish uchun biz bir fondni ta'sis qilgan. Yani bu işinki iqtisodiy chiqimlarini ko'tarish uchun bir fond ta'sis qilgan. Albatta bilasizlar, bu fond bu ishimizningki intayin iqtisodiy jihatda nurg'unlagan ehtiyojimiz bor. Shuning uchun hammanglarninki bizni qo'llash yuzasidan va bu ishninki muvaffaqiyatli ro'yobga chiqish uchun mush fondga o'zinglarninki fondga yordam qilishinglarni va bu yordam orqali bizni qo'llashinglarni umid qilaman.
Thank you. Yes, I've just reposted the link to the crowdfund in the comment section, so you should all be able to see that just underneath the comments that are coming in and on the YouTube video as well. Dr. Alla, there's two questions that have come in Uyghur. I don't know if you can see them on the right.
Yes, there's one question. Just a second. There's one question in Uyghur that the person is asking. Just 1 second. There's one person is asking that the Uyghurs in exile are the living evidence of provide living evidence to reveal the crimes of a Chinese government. So how are we able to save these Uyghurs from the persecution of Uyghurs? What are the concrete steps to take for this purpose?
Sorry, I'm not sure I followed the question.
Perhaps the question is more about the how to, for example, the background to this question is that if a Uyghur person gives evidence and if it's known to the Chinese government and Chinese government finds all the ways to silence that person and also persecuted the family members of that person. So it's a bit difficult for Uyghurs to come forward to give evidence because of the possibility of the punishment or retaliation of the Chinese government. And so how are we able to save these people, the evidence giving Uyghurs from Chinese persecution? I guess that's the question.
Okay, I understand. A very important question. All evidence that we gather, if persons want it kept confidential, that will happen, and the ICC will do exactly the same. So there are ways of getting evidence to ensure that persons are not known, are not exposed, and also there's a whole range of protective measures that can be put in place, even moving people from where they are if necessary, if they are in danger, to ensure that the evidence can be provided without them being named and without them in any way being open to security risks. So every step can be taken, and I'd encourage persons, if you do have evidence or know of others who do, to approach us. We will ensure that the necessary protective measures are in place to protect persons, and those can be done through our investigation and also through the ICC as well. The ICC has those measures and programs in place.
Thank you for that, Rodney. I believe we might have lost Dr. Alla, but perhaps, Saleh, you could just very briefly translate, if at all possible, that answer, because I believe it's an important one for our Uyghur listeners to hear. And then I think we can wrap up there for the day. But yes, just those comments about witnesses, I think it's important for all to hear that.
Just my Uyghur is not as proficient as Dr. Alla's, so I will try to do my best to briefly explain Mr. Rodney Dixon's response to the question. Unda qisqacha shu Rodney Dixon apandimniki javobini desak, ma'lum bir savolga bu shu Uyg'urlar Xitoyniki besimida qo'rqib o'tirib chiqqan mavzuda Çünkü motorga çıksa Xitoy shu ularni tehdit qiladi, oilalarini tehdit qiladi degandek masalalar bor. Buni qanday qilamiz degan masalasiga endi Rodney Dixon apandim sen shu biz bilan aloqalashsanglar shohidlarni bilindirmay kimligini o'tirg'a chiqarmay shunday qiyg'il bo'ldi. Dr. Mankinala.
Sorry, I was offline. Okay, now I'm back.
If Dr. Ella could explain, that would be better. I mean,
could you please give me the background to that, because I haven't heard much part of it. Sorry.
Don't worry. Rod, do you want to just give a very quick overview of what you mentioned?
Yes, there was a question about protective measures, as you know, and I was emphasizing that all of the evidence given is confidential if that's what persons want. It does not have to be made public, and there are a number of protective measures in place that can be used in the investigation and at the ICC as well to ensure that the evidence persons give is not made public, it doesn't identify them, and that any of their security concerns are addressed. So it's very important that you emphasize this and say persons should come forward, or if there are no persons who have relevant evidence, to come forward and not be concerned about the way in which that evidence will be used. It'll be done in a very controlled way and on their instructions and with all necessary confidentiality and protective measures in place.
Bu ispat belgüçülerinki salayeti ve belgen uçurlarınki məxfiyyətliki mutlaq saqlanıdı. Mail u belge vaqtida bo'lsin, ham bizningki shu materiallarni ishlatgan jarayonlarimizda bo'lsin, buning hammasida biz shu maxfiylikdan iborat bunday bir nimani prinsip bo'yicha ishlarni qilamiz. Albatta bu isbot berish intayin muhim. Shunga bir vaqtda isbot belgichininki ham isbotninki kelish manbai qatorliq uchurlarning hammasininki maxfiy saqlanish intayin muhim. Biz bu ishimizda boshdan oxir bu ishlar intayin diqqat qilamiz. Ham Uyg'urlarninki bizlar aloqalashib bu vaqtda isbot berishini umid qilamiz.
Thank you very much for that. I think we might wrap up there, as I believe we've answered all the questions that have come through in both English and Uyghur. So thank you all very much in the audience who have been watching this. It seems to have been quite a good turnout. So I'm glad that you're all interested and engaged and keeping up to date with the updates from our submission to the International Criminal Court. As soon as we have any response or any information that we can share with you as the public, we will absolutely do that, and we will make sure that we are keeping you all as informed as possible on all of these things that we are doing and anything that the ICC prosecutor decides in the coming months. I'd also like to thank all of our panelists who have been with us today. Thank you to the legal team, Rodney, Anne and Paul, for all your extremely hard work, everything that you've been doing for the past few months. And thank you, Prime Minister and Mr. President, as well for attending today and for all your support. And thank you, Dr. Alla, for your wonderful translation. Sorry for any technical glitches. It's been really great to have you on board and your support as well. I just want to reiterate once again that this work can't be done without some support from you all. So we have created the crowdfunding page, which I have posted in the comments, and it is also on the various social media pages of the East Turkestan Government in Exile and the East Turkestan National Awakening Movement. So I think without further ado, I think we can wrap up there. But thank you all very much for attending today, and we will keep you all updated in the coming months. If there's anything that you feel we haven't answered, please feel free to send an email. I will type my email into the comment section, and you can send emails that way as well. So thank you very much, and I look forward to having another session like this in the coming months. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.